Oh, wonderful. Welcome everyone to our webinar on diversity and inclusion. My name is Juan Jose Gallardo. I'm the current president of the CoreNet Global Southeast Florida chapter. We have the honor to host this webinar on a very interesting topic with a diverse and really top of the notch panel. Uh, Today, our Vice President, John Labus with Cisco, is going to do the moderation, and I'll hand it over to him in just a second. Just reminding you, CoreNet Global is a global nonprofit organization dedicated to advance the corporate real estate profession. And so we encompass end users on the one hand, service providers, economic development organizations, and faculty and students, all dedicated to the corporate real estate profession. And our intent right in the middle of this pandemic is to bring you relevant topics to the profession from different perspective, and that's what we're going to do today. Just reminding you, save the date for next month. We're also going to have a wonderful speaker, Isabel Barros, talking on October the 22nd at 4 p.m. We'll send you the invites. She is a member of the faculty of the Masters in Corporate Real Estate with CoreNet Global. And she will be talking about workplace strategy now that we're all getting ready to hopefully get back to the offices once hopefully the vaccine is already in place and we start to recoup a little sense of normal life. But with that said, John Labus, I hand it over to you to do the proper introductions and do the moderation for the day.
Thank you, Juan. Next slide. So again, I just want to welcome everyone and thank our panelists for joining us today for their insights on the topic of diversity and inclusion. Our panel today includes Mark Tone, who's the Senior Vice President of Human Resources for ABI STL in Tampa. ABI STL is the world's largest integrator of audio-visual collaboration solutions with more than 3,200 employees throughout North America and EMEA. Mark oversees all aspects of the HR function, including talent acquisition, learning and development, organizational design, and payroll and benefits. Welcome, Mark. Next, we have Travis Brewer. Next, we have Travis Brewer, who's the head of talent development and inclusion at Royal Caribbean Cruises. He is responsible for setting the global strategy for talent development to ensure the group's strategy. He leads a global team responsible for leadership and functional development, performance management, organizational development, and diversity inclusion for approximately 70,000 global shipboard crew and shoreline employees. Welcome, Travis.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Michelle Needles, Senior Vice President in the Occupier Services Platform at Colliers International. She advises corporate real estate clients on solutions to meet their business demands. She is also a subject matter expert in the global transaction management service delivery. She actively participates as one of the executive champions of the Colliers Diversity and Inclusion Program. As part of the Diversity and Inclusion Leadership Team, she is responsible for Colliers' inclusive strategies. Michelle recently voiced her passion during a TED Talk titled, "Is That What She Said?" In 2020, Michelle was recognized as one of HCL's Red Ladder Unstoppable Women, as well as one of Globe Street's 2020 Women of Influence. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So before we kick off the roundtable, we really want to recognize that the real estate and workplace industry has been intimately involved, and lots of what we do is embedded in inclusion and diversity, and those things are things that we see tangibly, whether it's mother's rooms, whether it's handicap ramps that address the ADA, et cetera. Some of the more recent things that the workplace and the real estate industry has addressed has been prayer rooms and gender neutral restrooms and facilities, and also things around well-being. So, you know, we do have a history, and what and the workplace and the real estate is kind of the visual representation of the of inclusion and diversity on many different levels. But I think in light of the summer that we've just been through and some of the heightened issues, it's going to go further. It's going to go beyond just, what we see in the workplace. So I think that this is a really great time to think about what that impact might be to the real estate and to the, somebody's waiting. Genevieve is joining. Welcome, Genevieve. And so, this is a really great time to begin to discuss, what that next step looks like, where inclusion diversity is going into the future. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to my colleague, Genevieve, who will take us through our roundtable discussion.
Thank you, John. Jen, can you hear us?
Sorry, I had to unmute. So once again, thank you to our panelists for agreeing to talk to us about this very serious topic. And we look forward to learning more from you. So you are probably in a better position than all of us and our audience about talking about this topic with the C-suite. So we'd like to probably ask you a little bit more about what is it that our C-suite, your C-suite is pondering as they discuss this issue of diversity and inclusion. Travis, may we start with you?
Sure, and thank you, Genevieve. Welcome, everyone. Over the last several months, the issue of racism in this country, while it's been here for a long time, has taken a unfortunately prominent front seat in the discussions. And CEOs and C-suite leaders are not immune to what's going on and are addressing it. So Royal Caribbean does a really good job of bringing diverse candidates in. We have very diverse crew members, crews on ships, but what's really important to them now is listening to all of our employees. While they know that these issues have existed, while they know that there are groups that have been marginalized over the years, and they've recognized that, what's happened with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, etc., has just put a very bright spotlight on our organization and our leaders. And so they began asking, what can we do? One of the first things that we did with them was to conduct listening sessions with our Black and African American employees. And this was Richard Fain, our CEO, as well as his direct reports. Each took different groups of Black and African American employees, 6 to 8 in a very small, intimate group, just to listen to what they had to say about their own personal as well as professional experiences. And like I said, while we know the stories, until you're in that room and you hear the stories and what these people have experienced, it's so hard. Even now, you don't know what it's like. But what our leaders have pledged to do is to listen more, to bring awareness to this inside the company through unconscious bias training. Our CEO signed the CEO for Action pledge and continue these listening sessions further down into the organization. So it is top of mind, and it's not going away for our leaders.
Thank you. Mark, would you like to add to this?
Yes, thank you, Genevieve. Thank you, Travis. That was very interesting. From our perspective, AVISPL, our leadership is very focused on how we can make our organization more diverse and how we can create a more inclusive environment. The world of audiovisual collaboration has been historically male-dominated, and so we're trying to change that in a number of ways through recruiting efforts, promotional efforts, education, and so on, to make sure that We provide more women with opportunities to join our company and to be successful in our company at high levels, as well as mid-management levels. And so that's a big focus for us. And obviously, as Travis mentioned, ensuring that we've created a positive, inclusive work environment for Black and other minority employees so they feel comfortable, so they can succeed in their roles. And so they have mentors as well that they can rely on to help them navigate the organization and be successful. So for us, this is really about increasing the diversity of our team, making sure we have a more inclusive environment, that we have the conversations that Travis mentioned, and we understand the perspectives of our diverse employees, and ultimately making our company better. That's what this is really about, is diversity and equity and inclusion initiatives make your company better. And so that's a very important aspect of what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you. Michelle, what is the C-suite saying at Collier International, or even some of your customers? Would love to hear that.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, is it's both what we're experiencing as, members of our own community at work, but also what we're hearing from other companies. And certainly, there are a lot of different stages of maturity and where different organizations are. But I would say overwhelmingly, what I've seen from executives is, how do we ensure that what we're doing today is genuinely implemented as part of our culture so that our employees feel that sense of belonging? And I think it's very important today because we do have more employees working from home than we ever have. So we're still going to a workplace, but our workplace now is, it's more of a sentiment, a feeling, do we belong where we are? And if your culture is not right, it doesn't matter what your physical workspace is going to look like. So how do we ensure that we're doing the right things and doing them the right way to have our culture reflect that? So that's what I've seen, and I'm encouraged by it. I think it means that we're being deliberate, that we're being intentioned about our diversity and inclusion objectives. And it means that we now have, as folks that are driving for diversity and inclusion within our organizations as one of our many full-time jobs there, that we're going to be successful. It may take time, but when the C-suite is behind it, you know that you'll be able to meet those objectives. So I think that's, I've been encouraged by what I've seen amongst our clients, and everyone's been open to hearing about the innovation that others are driving for. So it's great to hear, where Travis is speaking to the maturity of where where they are relative to diversity and inclusion, maybe at a different stage from Collier's, but we're sharing those insights. To hear that gives me ideas. So I think collaborating and understanding that also it's not a race to become the most diverse organization. This is something that we're all doing together. So I think the C-suite and the senior executives are really getting that as well. We're opening up the opportunities, and we're being vulnerable with our peers to talk about how we can be better and how we can incorporate those practices.
And I believe that a lot of people are concerned about, are we checking boxes or are we actually doing a cultural change? And what I'm hearing is that when the C-suite is behaving, listening, that is definitely sending a different kind of message, modeling the behaviors. Would you agree with that, Michelle?
I would. I think the one thing that, I've heard, a few times now, and I think it's worth repeating again and again is, is this a moment or is this a movement? And it's incumbent on all of us to ensure that this is a movement, that we're making a change, and that we have to be very frank that, we have to be mindful of what is, what's the best path for our companies to have sustainable change in the future, but also, our fiduciary responsibilities to the company's shareholders and stakeholders. So when the C-suite's behind it, we know that they're willing to put those delicate conversations and that financial responsibility, they're willing to put that at risk to ensure that we have the right culture to support what these objectives are.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Somebody in the chat box asked, is diversity and inclusion different in different companies? And Travis, if you don't mind, I would like for you to share the inclusion index model that you shared with us. Let me see if I can share that with everybody.
Sure. Yeah, we this past spring and then into the summer, we participated in actually 2 different surveys. One was through Diversity Inc., where they benchmark against the top companies in the US on your demographics, on your processes, your procedures around diversity and inclusion, and then benchmark you and slot you where you fall against the best. And we were actually identified as a noteworthy company first time we participated, so hopefully we can get into the top 50 soon. And then in June, we participated in the Russell Reynolds Inclusion Index survey. And what Genevieve has up here is the model that they use. They actually survey around 8 dimensions of inclusion, working, and you see different color codings. It's really around 3 pillars: climate, structure, and leadership. And then the 8 dimensions fall under that: employee recruitment and development, accommodating differences, organizational fairness, voice and influence. To what extent do people feel that their voice is heard? And where the Diversity Inc. survey is really just benchmarking what you have, the Russell Reynolds Index, the survey that we sent to the employees, is really their perception of how we are doing in all 8 of these areas. So the questions were asked around these 8 dimensions. And then based on that, we are looking at the recommendations that have come out of both to be able to put together a strategy and a plan for not only 2020, but for the next 3 to 5 years. What do we want to do? And the survey, because this is what our employees are saying, has really been an eye-opening experience for our leaders. They think we're doing well, and then they read some of the comments and see some of the scoring. I will say we scored higher than the benchmark on 6 of the 8 dimensions, but we have work to do in all of them.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. So my next question was also, what are you implementing or plan to implement? So that's part of your answer. Are there any other initiatives that Royal Caribbean is considering?
Yeah, so one of the things that we knew before the survey we wanted to do was to re-engage our Executive Diversity Council, which will be chaired by one of the C-suite leaders. And the council is really made up of the top leaders in the organization, and their role is to be the, I don't want to say oversight, but kind of the governing body around what we're doing in diversity inclusion, so that they help us drive this further into the organization. That's one thing. Richard signing the CEO for Action was another. The listening sessions we want to continue. And on the Diversity Inc. survey around our processes and tools, we know that supplier diversity is an area where we need to improve. We can do better. We know that certainly how we bring people into the organization from the talent acquisition side, we can always do better. And we've got a plan in place to start presenting more diverse slates to our managers. And while we haven't put targets around anything, we just know that we incrementally need to improve in a lot of areas.
Mark, what are some of the key initiatives that you plan to implement?
Well, it's interesting that the timing of this discussion is very relevant for ABI SPL because we've just launched a more sophisticated approach, what I would call, to these initiatives. We know we have work to do. but we want to understand what the best ways are to achieve what we want to accomplish. So we've engaged a third-party consultant that specializes in DEI initiatives to help us think through the things that we need to do. We do a number of pretty good things currently and have for a number of years. Our recruiting efforts are very diverse. We reach out to any number of diverse job seeking organizations throughout the country within 50 miles of any office in which one of our positions is posted. We also have mentoring and internship programs for our folks. We're a founding member of the AVIXA Women's Council, which is our trade group, and that enables a number of women throughout our organization to learn more about the industry and to share their thoughts about not only our company, but the industry in general, and bring those ideas and thoughts back to us. So in addition to that, one of the things that, some of the things we hope come out of this current effort will be based on the results of employee surveys, employee roundtable discussions that have been taking place over the last few weeks, a leadership roundtable discussion that's taken place as well, which our consultant has helped us organize and lead and moderate. And some of the results of that, to Travis's point earlier, are very interesting. Right? You think you're doing a pretty decent job, and until a bunch of people tell you that you aren't. And we're starting to see that, and not in a negative way either, a very constructive way, which I think is very good. I think our employees feel, generally speaking, that we're a good company, that we provide a good environment, but they're telling us how we need to do better. So there will be several things that come out of that. Most certainly additional education and learning around what it means to be a diverse and inclusive and equitable organization, and the types of things that we need to do additionally in order to progress down that road. We talked a little bit earlier about how does this not become a check the box exercise. So some of the things that we're thinking through are how do we institutionalize what we're doing? Potentially and very likely creating a diversity council, for example. Routinely taking pulse surveys of our employees on particular issues to make sure we're keeping on top of the current thinking and current ideas that people have around these issues. And also enhanced training for managers to ensure that we're not only recruiting effectively from a diverse environment, but that we're treating everyone fairly and equitably in terms of pay equity, promotional opportunities, educational opportunities, and so on. So those are some of the things that we're looking to institutionalize going forward, and we're very much looking forward to some more specific recommendations that will be forthcoming over the next few weeks with respect to some of these recent employee discussions and surveys we've had.
Thank you. Great. Michelle, can you share with us what are some key initiatives that you are implementing or will implement?
Absolutely. So it was funny while Travis and Mark were both speaking, I kept writing down, oh yeah, we're doing that too. We're doing that. So it's part of it is listening to others and making sure, all right, we're on the right page. We're doing the things that we should be doing. So, ensuring that we have the pulse surveys, I think that's so important. The voice of the employee is incredibly valuable. Making sure that we're addressing pay equity as it relates to all diverse categories, not just female to male pay equity, but really looking at that broadly. Crew had a great survey that they had released a few weeks back about the commercial real estate industry and pay inequity there, and I thought it was really eye-opening. I think for us at Colliers, specifically, there are a few initiatives that some of which our peers and competitors have undertaken, prior to us, but they're things that we recognize that we needed to do. One was the development of employee resource groups, or ERGs, and ensuring that we have, the various groups, that they have a voice and that they have a group that's representing them within the organization specifically. We developed a Black Equality Task Force, and that was, our way to be able to solicit feedback and opinions on how we can make adjustments and be able to make change. And it includes, evaluating mentorship opportunities, how we're introducing commercial real estate as a viable career to others that, because we've been historically a legacy business, how do you introduce that to people who may not realize that that's a career for them? And that isn't necessarily diversity specific, but that's important to bring diverse voices and diverse experiences to the playing field. I would say, a few other areas that are incredibly important to us are making sure that we have those benchmarks. So surveying, identification, obviously it's, it's all voluntary, but encouraging our employees to ensure that they're represented, because if you don't measure it, you can't improve it. So we have to ensure that we've got those benchmarks of our employee base. And then lastly, developing a robust, inclusive leadership program that, we actually pilot with key members of our diverse leadership so that they have a voice in ensuring that the leadership we're rolling out to the large organization next year is something that they feel speaks to them as well. So we're trying to do a lot of things and to do them well. So there are certainly opportunities that we have to start working on next year, as our future strategic planning goes. But being organized and having the information is really critical.
And I'm sure that's challenging. You mentioned something about constantly being relevant and making sure that you're the voice of the users. But let's talk about benchmark. How do you stay relevant as this topic keeps on evolving and changing? And it's heavily emotional as well. So I'm just curious, how do we manage that? Does anybody have any thoughts?
It's challenging, and quite honestly, it's one of the things that we're trying to think through as not just as a leadership team, but as an organization. How do we do this in a very positive way, in a very inclusive way, that that doesn't become divisive, that doesn't become politicized, that doesn't create more problems than it solves.
Tension,
because it is a very emotional topic, and I understand that, and rightly so. So how do we use that in a positive way? And I think one of the answers is to create very specific objective tasks or goals for the organization that people can look at and say, that makes sense. We do need to increase the number of women in our organization. We do need to increase the number of the diversity of our recruiting pool. We do need to do this. We do need to do more training on DE&I topics. So I think when you start to talk about specific action items and specific steps that organizations can take, that helps you turn that emotion into some positive steps that can be measured. And I agree 100% with Michelle that having the data is really important for this purpose. And it's a little bit easier in some ways for AVI-SPL because as a federal contractor, we've had affirmative action programs for a number of years. So we measure this data on a regular basis, office by office, not just women and men, but minority employees versus white employees. And pay equity is also a part of those measurements too. So we have a great amount of data around some of the key issues that we're trying to address, and it's very helpful.
Travis, do you have a point of view on that?
Yeah, I think benchmarking with other companies is absolutely important, and staying abreast of what the latest in the diversity and inclusion space is. But for me, and I think for us, the voice of our employee telling us, it doesn't matter if it's your engagement survey or a D&I survey or whatever survey, let your employees tell you how you're doing around these certain areas, and then do something about the themes that you're hearing. You can't do everything, but pick out the big pieces. Pick out 2 or 3, maybe 4 things you can do, because if you don't do something, your employees will quit telling you how bad you are or where you need to improve. So it's listening to the voice of the customer, the employee in this case, and doing something about it, bringing in best practices, bringing in your benchmarking and best programs, but just listening to your employees. They'll tell you how good you are, or I think it was Mark, how bad you are at things.
Great. Thank you. Michelle, did you want to add? I'm sorry.
Yeah, let's be honest. We, in the past, in the business world, we have not encouraged our employees to tell us what they really think. We simply haven't. And there's a reason for that. We typically, in most courses of business, try to keep emotional conversations out of the workplace. And I think that we need to acknowledge that in order for someone to feel that they belong in their workplace, they need to be acknowledged. They need to be understood. And all of those kind of, squishy emotional topics are really meaningful. They matter and they mean something to that person. So, if you look at, feedback from other individuals, because in my personal mentorship, I've been mentoring 2 women of color. I reached out to professional peers of mine that were people of color, male and female, to ask them, hey, how am I, moving forward, if I'm giving them advice, I want to make sure I'm not doing the wrong thing. I'm not, I don't want to be too provocative and make them feel uncomfortable, but I want to encourage them. And, one of the areas of feedback I got was, first of all, asking is one of the best things that we can do, getting that feedback and hearing the voices, but also we're asking groups of individuals who have historically felt like they needed to put their heads down and be quiet in the workplace to be successful. We're now asking them to give us feedback. So I think that we need to, be understanding of that and be observant of that, it can be emotional to hear bad feedback, or it can be emotional to experience some of the things that we're doing today. But it's the voice of our employees. It's the voice of people within our organization. And if they're emotional about it, if, they're tough topics for them to take on, we have to understand that some of this may require easing into. So I think it's going to take some time for everyone to get some comfort around being open, because it's simply not something in the business world that we've encouraged, for very long. So I think we will find ourselves in a period of unease, but if you're not a little bit uncomfortable, then you're not moving forward. So I think it's yeah. I think it's how we stay relevant as we challenge ourselves and continue to encourage others.
And to build on that point, Michelle, during our listening sessions, one of the questions we ask the groups is, we talk about bringing your whole self to work. What does that mean to you? And it's been really interesting in intact groups. So whether it's the Hispanic group or the Black African American, I hear people talk about giving 110% every day at work. And their answers have focused around the work and not as much about what it means to bring your whole self to work is being able to talk about your personal life, being able to talk about the struggles you have with your boss or with your coworkers. It's not just the work side, but it's really interesting to hear them focus so much on the work side, because that's basically the message we've given them, and maybe everyone, is just come to work, do your job, keep your head down, don't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting to me is that it's obviously we have to demonstrate empathy probably more than ever because of the situation, the context we're living right now. In the past, we used to say it's about work-life balance, which is ironic because it's about work-life integration. And right now it's one a big blur. So I think we're all talking about well-being, which is three components: emotional, cognitive, and physical well-being. And empathy is at the base of all this. So I appreciate that. So can you help us as professionals, and can you think of ways that we can actually signal in our physical environments this whole notion or message about the diversity and inclusion? Can you share maybe some examples of what you've seen or that addresses or not address diversity and inclusion?
You know what, Jen, I'll take the lead on that to start. I really think that the impact to the built environment takes a lot of understanding around unconscious bias. And I know that unconscious bias has been a strong topic over the course of the past year, if not, for those of us in the D&I community, well before that. But unconscious bias, it revolves around so many different topics: ableness, ensuring that we have accommodations for those of different religions, having gender neutral bathrooms. But in order for us to think about those topics, we need to acknowledge some of the biases that we have. So, with so many ways that we can be biased, and I think there's a slide on that in terms of the types of biases that exist. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us. It's all we have to do is acknowledge it. One example from a real estate perspective that I find, so funny is every time I walk into a client's built environment and I see an internal stairwell that's all glass, I always laugh at that and think, okay, well, as a woman and someone wearing a skirt, I'm not super comfortable walking up a glass flight of stairs. But then I also think, well, gosh, I worked out really hard this morning and my knees are kind of bothering me and I'm wearing 3-inch heels. I don't want to walk up those stairs. From an able perspective, I don't feel that that is, accommodating to, someone who very simply has sore knees, much less someone who has a true disability that requires assistance when they're climbing stairs and that kind of thing. So I think a lot of these areas in our built environment, if you click to the next slide, slide 8, we need to address those. And we need to make sure that our leaders in the real estate space, our leaders in the business and people services, have that understanding of what these bias types are, how we can acknowledge them and make our space designs and accommodations more empathetic as part of that approach. I think, even ADA, we have, there are ADA exemptions, throughout the United States for buildings of certain types, ages, or locations. And so, maybe an employer is not making the effort to make a space ADA compliant if it isn't required by law, but maybe it's still something that you should do because it's the right thing for your employees. So, from my perspective, acknowledging these biases is so important, either through, through a scheduled training series with your employees or, making it part of different roundtable conversations. I think this ties so much to real estate, to making sure that we acknowledge that in the way that we build our space.
And I'm glad you're bringing a different perspective to diversity and inclusion. So it's not only the Black women and so on, it's everything. So thank you for sharing that. I think you have one more slide that you wanted to share a little bit more.
I did. And this was, relative to those of us that are in, service provider relationships, but also those of us that are in buying positions. So CRE leads, project management facilities leads that are working as part of outsourced buyer supplier relationships. How is it that, that we on either sides of the table can create greater opportunities for alignment? There's certainly some examples here: diversity initiative planning, making sure that you've got open book opportunities between you and the position that you are. For example, one of our large clients here at Colliers has a really impressive program that they're building out for D&I, and they brought all of their suppliers to the table to help understand how we can create one cohesive diversity initiative across their entire platform. And I think that's a great way to align those opportunities. Making sure that you've got involvement in the community and also with internship programs. So I know there are a lot of companies right now that are looking at how can we bring opportunities to HBCUs or underrepresented high schools as well. I'm part of a program called the Global Mentoring Initiative, which works with mentoring rising seniors in different areas of underrepresentation. And it's a great way, to increase my knowledge, but also help them, build their skills to help them have a great career out of college. Employee research groups, I think we talked about, but also recruitment fairs. A lot of this comes down to access, making sure that you're providing access to opportunities, both with your company and, where you have supplier relationships that you can partner on those. How can you bring greater access to more diverse individuals, more diverse opportunities, and making sure that there are no barriers to entry relative to those biases that that could create skepticism or hesitation with either physical barriers or different issues relative to cultural barriers that may exist.
Mm-hmm.
Great, totally agree. Thank you so much for sharing this. Anybody else want to help our audience better understand how the physical environment could probably help us think through the diversity and inclusion?
Actually, I wanted to ask the panel. You spoke about having the opinion of the employees, but I wonder if we could do something with the universities, because those are the future employees that will get involved in our professions, and it's fairly diverse if you go to university or college. And we as an organization with CoreNet Global have access to universities here, and we'd be delighted to do something in partnership with you guys and the faculty and the students, and maybe produce something from their perspective even before they hit us. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, excuse me, Juan. Thank you. Yes, one of the things that we've done as part of our enhanced recruiting efforts is we've developed programs with community colleges and four-year colleges around the country where we have some of our larger offices. One of the ways, I think Michelle mentioned it earlier, we have to demonstrate to people that this is a career option for you. This is a job out in the world, AV integration and collaboration.
Right.
The vast majority of students might not understand what that is. So we've worked with 2- and 4-year colleges to create programs for them to teach, and our folks frequently are part of the teaching programs at those colleges, and it's a perfect source for us to get interns, almost all of whom end up with full-time job offers. And so we want to expand that. We're only doing it with about 4 or 5 colleges right now in some of our larger markets, but we certainly want to expand that partnership because it's a perfect pipeline to talented younger people or not so young people who are going back to school and getting their degree, to teach them how they can be part of AVI-SPL. So when they see a job opening, they say, oh yeah, I know what that is. I know what the AV industry is about.
And have you been able to ask them what would make them feel comfortable or welcome, say, for example, in terms of height, weight, age, or these other approaches? Because you're attracting them, but I wonder if these other questions are being made.
Those are the conversations we're starting to have now with our employees, but we're just at the very early stages of that.
Yeah, it's interesting in the recruiting space. You talk about the attending job fairs. We've really been discussing that over the last year, and it's hard to recruit minorities when the people going out to recruit don't look like them. So we've made a much more conscious effort to bring in our employee resource group, those who are members of our employee resource groups, to be a part of that journey with us when we go out to those universities to recruit. And the same thing for our interns. We want to make sure that we're bringing in a diverse group of interns. We unfortunately didn't have an internship program this year, but we did reach out to the ones we had been talking to and did a virtual summer internship program. And so they got to work on projects, and we were purposeful about how we approached those projects, and they got to present to our leadership. So it's, thinking creatively, but if the recruiters going out aren't reflective of your organization and the people you're trying to recruit, it makes it a lot more difficult to convince people, come to work for us, we're diverse. But I'm a white guy trying to recruit Hispanics or African Americans or even females. So, but trust me, we're diverse, right?
That's so true. I think that's really important. I also think too, on the flip side of that, because I agree 100%, Mark and Travis, with both of you. I think that, at the end of the day, we have to uphold the things that we're saying, what we're recruiting and what we're bringing these potential employees in to be part of. And that means, the very definition of culture in an organization is, what are the values that you're willing to hire and fire by? So we've got to make sure that our leaders, those in the C-suite, down to the managerial level, make sure that they understand that this is a cultural imperative for us to be an inclusive organization that's focused on, bringing diverse voices and having a sense of belonging. And if there are people that, are creating challenges to what that culture is, then they aren't people that belong in this organization. And I think that's where the rubber starts to meet the road is, making sure that we're not just bringing in the right people, but we're also exiting the people that just aren't a right fit. And so I think that's something that it's a little bit harder to use as a selling point within the organization, but I think it's definitely a challenge that we have to live every day, make sure that we're proving that.
So true. I heard of somebody who posted something that was unfortunately offensive on their social media and was let go. So it's a reality. Yeah, unfortunately.
And you speak to the cultural piece, Michelle. One of my pet peeves is organizations filling out surveys to be in the top whatever. It's the human rights for gays. Yes, organizations can say, what boxes aren't we checking? Let's put a policy in place. Let's make sure, and we check all the boxes and we submit our application and we get a 100 because prospective employees look at those to say, is that the place I want to work? Top employer for African Americans. But when you come in the door, does the culture welcome that and match the 100 score that you received on the survey? So it's a cultural change for a lot of us, and we have to back up what we say by how we act.
Right. Well, and I think, part of that too is enabling and preparing and encouraging our employees across all levels to really take the charge and change conversations or challenge, situations that they're in, because, that was, the topic of my TED Talk was about, simply if you're part of a conversation that is challenging, that's disruptive, that's not inclusive, and you don't challenge that, you don't interrupt it, you don't stop what people are talking about, then you own that repercussion. You're part of that conversation. You've now, put your business card in the fishbowl, for the consequences of what happens there. So I think that's part of it too, is encouraging everyone throughout the organization to have the license to say, is that really what we should be talking about now? Or, this is not, in line with our culture and our values. And that takes time to get everyone on that same page. But I think we have to do that to really live what our values are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it takes a management team that understands that, because if the management, we've said it before in several different contexts, if the management team doesn't buy into that, then it just won't get off the ground.
Right.
And
right.
so part of what organizations really need to look at, and we did this a few years ago. It wasn't specifically with respect to D&I initiatives or anything related to that, but we had some areas in our company where we just had some really poor managers. They were poor at communicating to their people. They were poor at listening. They just were not effective in their role. And it wasn't necessarily a D&I issue, although it might have been in a couple cases. But we started making some pretty significant changes in that regard and bringing in people who had a proven track record of engaging with employees and listening to employees and creating those types of positive environments. And boy, our retention rates in some of those offices and some of those areas started climbing rapidly. And that's exactly what we wanted. And now I think the next step for us anyway, because we're still, in the crawl stage of this crawl, walk, run process. But part of the next step for us will be taking those good managers we already have and now layering in better understanding and better knowledge of diversity and inclusion issues and how we need to listen for those issues as well as just being an effective manager and a good people person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. So we have a few minutes but I would probably like to wrap it up and get your head nods if you're agreeing with this. But as the VPs of real estate and leading the real estate in our own companies, what I'm hearing is that we have to demonstrate empathy, definitely engage with our employees in the local community, model the behaviors, and then listen and align with the C-suite on their priorities, so in order to identify where we can contribute. Did I miss something, or should we add something?
I think there's a customer for us. There's a customer component to this. Are we getting feedback from our customers on diversity and inclusion issues? And we've started doing that. We survey our customers quite regularly. Net Promoter Score is part of that, because we know if the higher the Net Promoter Score, the more likely that the guest is to come back and sail with us. So we want to hear feedback from our guests.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. I love the idea of those roundtables and surveys, because you get a lot of good, rich data behind that as well. Yeah. Great. Well, once again, I want to thank you so much for helping us understand this very emotional and complex topic. So, Juan, I'm going to let you close if you want to.
Thank you very much, Genevieve. Great job. I'm very glad that you were able to join us after all. And John, thank you very much for opening it to the panel. I can only thank you from the bottom of my heart. This was a very enriching conversation. And as an organization, we're hopeful that we can contribute to your efforts. If we can do it, we'll be delighted. Miles is saying something there. I guess.
So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And back everybody to work, because I'm sure everybody has another call in just a minute. So,
well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We hope that maybe we can revisit soon and we can talk about progress.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.